Ma'am, we have a warrant for your arrest.
What?
We have undeniable evidence of fraud. Yeah.
Yes, they won't be able to deny this.
Can love survive the darkest storm?
The day had finally arrived, the day my son was getting married. I remember waking up that morning with a flutter in my chest, a mix of excitement and nerves swirling inside me. After all, this wasn't just any wedding. It was the start of a new chapter for our family, a chance to welcome my daughter-in-law into our lives. I wanted everything to be perfect. The house was buzzing with activity flowers being arranged, the scent of fresh coffee filling the kitchen, and my heart full of hope that this day would bring us closer together. For months I had watched my son and his fiancée grow closer, and I had tried my best to build a relationship with her. I won't lie, there were moments when I felt like an outsider, like I was watching from the sidelines. But today, I was determined to bridge that gap. When she handed me the gift, wrapped in delicate paper with a satin bow, I felt a surge of warmth. It was beautifully wrapped, almost too perfect, and I could see the effort she had put into it. Maybe this was her way of saying, "I want us to be family." I smiled, genuinely touched. "Thank you," I said, my voice a little shaky with emotion. She smiled back, a soft, almost shy smile that made me think maybe, just maybe, we were on the same page. The room felt full of promise, laughter echoing softly as the wedding preparations continued around us. I held the gift carefully, turning it over in my hands, imagining what could be inside: jewelry, a keepsake, something meaningful, I hoped. As I sat down, the afternoon sun casting a warm glow through the window, I felt a rare sense of peace. For once, the tension that had lingered between us seemed to melt away. I thought about how much I wanted this to work, not just for my son, but for me too. I wanted to believe that this gift was a symbol of new beginnings, a bridge over the rocky waters of family drama. But life has a way of twisting even the most hopeful moments into something unrecognizable. I didn't know it then, but the gift in my hands was the calm before a storm I never saw coming. The kind of storm that shakes you to your core, that makes you question everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you. I carefully untied the satin bow, my fingers trembling slightly. The paper crinkled softly as I peeled it back, revealing the box beneath. It was heavier than I expected, and a strange chill ran down my spine. I hesitated for just a second, a tiny voice in the back of my mind whispering that something wasn't right. But I pushed the thought away. After all, this was a gift from my daughter-in-law, the woman who was about to become my family. With a deep breath, I lifted the lid, and in that moment, everything changed. I never imagined what would happen next. No sooner had I lifted the lid of the box than a sharp, insistent knock echoed through the house. At first, I thought it was just another guest arriving for the wedding preparations, maybe a florist or a caterer. But the knock came again, louder, more urgent. My heart, still fluttering from the excitement of the gift, suddenly skipped a beat. I set the box down slowly, a strange unease creeping over me. I walked to the door, my mind racing but trying to stay calm. When I opened it, 2 police officers stood there, their faces serious, almost grim. One of them held a thick envelope, which he unfolded carefully before speaking. "Ma'am, we have a warrant to search your home." For a moment, I thought I must have misheard. "A warrant? What for?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The other officer stepped forward, his eyes scanning me as if trying to read my soul. "We have reason to believe there is evidence related to an ongoing investigation inside this residence." I blinked, confusion swirling into panic. "Evidence? What kind of evidence? I don't understand. My hands trembled, and I glanced back at the box on the table, the gift I had just opened. Suddenly, everything felt like it was spinning out of control. The officers asked me to step aside so they could come in. I hesitated, my mind screaming that this couldn't be happening, not here, not now, not to me. But I knew I had no choice. I stepped back, my legs weak, and watched as they began to move through the house with a quiet but determined purpose. As they searched, I stood frozen, my thoughts a chaotic storm. How could this be happening? Just moments ago, I was filled with hope and joy, and now I was being treated like a criminal in my own home. The contrast was unbearable. Joy turned to fear, trust shattered by suspicion. I tried to make sense of it all. Was this some terrible mistake? Had someone set me up? My mind immediately went to my daughter-in-law. The gift, could it be connected? The thought was so painful, so unbelievable, that I almost pushed it away. But deep down, a cold knot of doubt began to form. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, breaking through my spiraling thoughts. "We need to ask you some questions." I nodded numbly, my voice caught in my throat. "Of course, please, just tell me what's going on." They explained that the gift I had just opened contained items linked to a serious crime, something I had no knowledge of, but that implicated me nonetheless. I felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath me. How could something so personal, so intimate, be used against me? My mind flashed back to the smiles, the laughter, the warmth of the morning. How quickly it had all turned to cold suspicion and fear. I looked at the officers, searching their faces for any sign of mercy or understanding, but found none. "Why are you here?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "Why would my daughter-in-law do this to me?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but all I could do was stand there, trembling, as the police continued their search. In that moment, I realized my world was no longer the safe place I had known. The people I trusted, the family I loved, suddenly felt like strangers. And the gift, once a symbol of hope, had become the key to a nightmare I never saw coming. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breath, but the fear was suffocating. What would happen next? How would I prove my innocence? And most terrifying of all, what did my daughter-in-law have to do with this? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew one thing for certain. My life was about to change forever. The officers gathered around the box I had just opened, their expressions grim and unyielding. One of them carefully pulled out a small, sealed envelope tucked beneath the tissue paper. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure they could hear it. Then, with a voice cold and official, the lead officer said, "Ma'am, this envelope contains documents and items that link you to a serious fraud investigation. We have reason to believe you were involved in embezzling funds from a local charity." I stared at him, utterly speechless. Fraud, embezzlement. None of it made any sense. I had never even been involved in anything remotely illegal. My hands shook as I looked down at the envelope, the weight of the accusation crushing me. How could this be happening? How could my daughter-in-law, someone I was supposed to trust, have sent me something that would bring the police to my door? The officers began to explain the evidence in detail. Forged signatures, bank statements, and emails, all supposedly traced back to me. I listened numb as they laid out the case against me. Every word felt like a blow, each detail a fresh wound. I wanted to scream, to tell them they were wrong, but the words caught in my throat, and then it hit me, the betrayal. The cold, bitter truth that the person who should have been family, who should have stood by me, had set this trap. My daughter-in-law, the woman I had tried so hard to accept, to love, had orchestrated this nightmare. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe my own family could do this to me. The humiliation was unbearable. I felt exposed, like my entire life was being torn apart in front of strangers. The neighbors, the friends, the people I had known for years. What would they think? How could I face them now? Tears welled up in my eyes, but I blinked them away fiercely. I wasn't going to break, not yet. But inside, I was crumbling. The helplessness was suffocating. How do you fight when the people you love are the ones who have turned against you? I thought about my son. How would he react when he found out? Would he believe me, or would he side with his wife? The thought of losing him, of being alienated from my own family, was almost too much to bear. As the officers continued their questioning, I tried to piece together what had happened. Had my daughter-in-law been planning this all along? Was this some twisted way to get rid of me, to take control of the family, or worse, to cover up something she was hiding? The questions swirled in my mind, but no answers came. All I knew was that my world had shattered, and I was left standing in the ruins, desperate for a way out. I looked back at the gift, the beautiful wrapping, the delicate bow, and felt a wave of anger. How could something so lovely hide such darkness? How could I have been so blind? But even in that moment of despair, a small spark of determination flickered inside me. I refused to be a victim. I refused to let this betrayal define me. I would fight for my name, for my family, for the truth, because if I didn't, who would? And as the officers finished their questions and prepared to take me in for further investigation, I knew this was only the beginning of a long, painful battle. But I was ready to face it, no matter what it took. When the initial shock began to fade, a fierce resolve took its place. I refused to let this nightmare define me. I was not going to be the woman who crumbled under the weight of false accusations and family betrayal. No, if anything, this was the moment I had to be stronger than ever. The first step was finding a lawyer who believed in me. I remember sitting in that small, sterile office, clutching my purse like a lifeline as I explained everything. The gift, the police, the accusations, and most painfully, the betrayal by my daughter-in-law. The lawyer listened carefully, nodding with a seriousness that gave me a flicker of hope. "We'll fight this," she said firmly. "We'll find the truth." With her help, I began gathering every scrap of evidence I could find to prove my innocence. Bank statements, emails, phone records, I combed through them all, searching for anything that could unravel the web of lies that had been spun around me. It was exhausting, frustrating, and at times utterly heartbreaking. But with every piece of proof I uncovered, my confidence grew. I also reached out to friends and neighbors, people who knew me well and could vouch for my character. Their support was a balm to my wounded spirit. I realized I wasn't alone in this fight, even if it felt like my own family had turned their backs on me. But the hardest part was facing my daughter-in-law. I knew I had to confront her, not with anger or accusations, but with the quiet strength of someone who refuses to be broken. I invited her to meet me privately, hoping for answers, or at least a chance to understand why she had done this. When she arrived, her face was unreadable, a mask of calm that barely hid the tension beneath. I looked her in the eye and said, "Why? Why would you do this to me, to our family?" For a moment she said nothing. Then, with a coldness that cut deeper than any words, she replied, "You don't understand. This was necessary." Her words stung, but I refused to let them shake me. Necessary? Betraying your own mother-in-law, framing me for a crime I didn't commit. She shrugged as if it was nothing. Sometimes you have to do what's best for yourself. That was the moment I realized just how far this had gone. This wasn't just about jealousy or a petty grudge. It was calculated, cold, and cruel. But I wasn't going to let her win. I left that meeting with a fire burning inside me. I was no longer the frightened woman who had opened that gift with hope in her heart. I was a fighter, ready to expose the truth, no matter the cost. Days turned into weeks as the legal battle unfolded. There were moments of despair when the evidence seemed stacked against me, when my son refused to believe my side of the story, when the whispers and sideways glances from people I once called Friends made me feel utterly alone, but every time I felt myself faltering, I reminded myself why I was fighting. Not just for my name, but for my dignity, my family, and my future. Slowly, the tide began to turn. My lawyer uncovered inconsistencies in the evidence, emails that had been forged, and witnesses who came forward to support me. Piece by piece, the truth started to emerge from the shadows, and through it all, I held onto my strength. I refused to let despair consume me. I refused to let betrayal define me, because sometimes the darkest moments reveal the brightest parts of ourselves. I was no longer a victim, I was a warrior. And I was ready to win. The hardest battle wasn't in the courtroom or with the police. It was at home, where the heart of my family was breaking apart right before my eyes. The accusations had torn a deep rift between us, and suddenly the people I loved most were caught in a storm of doubt, anger, and confusion. My son, the man I had raised and loved unconditionally, was caught in the middle. I could see it in his eyes, the pain of being torn between his mother and his wife. He wanted to believe me, but the evidence, the whispers, and the pressure from his wife made it almost impossible. Every conversation with him felt like walking on a tightrope, fragile and fraught with tension. "Mom, I don't know what to think anymore," he said one evening, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "I want to believe you, but this is serious. I have to protect my family." Those words cut deeper than any accusation. I wanted to scream that I was still his mother, that I was innocent, that I needed him now more than ever. But all I could do was nod, swallowing the lump in my throat. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold and distant. Family dinners became silent affairs, with eyes darting away and conversations stifled by unspoken fears. My daughter-in-law, emboldened by the chaos she had sown, grew colder, more distant, as if she was already claiming victory. I felt isolated, abandoned by the very people I had hoped would stand by me. The loneliness was suffocating. But even in the darkest moments, unexpected allies appeared. Old friends who had known me for years reached out with words of comfort and support. Neighbors who had witnessed my kindness and integrity stood by my side. One afternoon, my closest friend came over, holding my hands tightly. "You're not alone," she said firmly. "We believe in you. We know who you really are." Her words were a lifeline, a reminder that family isn't always just blood. It's the people who stand by you when everything falls apart. Still, the question haunted me every day. Would my son stand by me, or would I lose him forever? I tried to reach him, to remind him of the bond we shared, the years of love and sacrifice. But every attempt seemed to push him further away, caught between loyalty to his wife and the mother who had raised him. One night, I found myself sitting alone in the living room, clutching a photo of my son as a child. I whispered into the silence, "Please don't let this tear us apart." The weight of the betrayal, the accusations, and the fractured family threatened to break me. But beneath the heartbreak, a quiet strength grew. I realized that no matter what happened, I had to keep fighting not just for justice, but for the chance to heal the wounds that had been inflicted on all of us. Because family is complicated, it's messy, painful, and sometimes heartbreaking, but it's also where hope can be found, even in the darkest times. And I wasn't ready to give up on mine. Just when I thought the nightmare couldn't get any worse, the truth came crashing down on me like a tidal wave, shattering everything I thought I knew about my daughter-in-law and about the tangled web of lies she had spun. The truth was more shocking than I ever imagined. It started with a small detail, a slip-up during one of the lawyer's investigations. A name, a date, a transaction that didn't quite add up. My lawyer called me late one evening, her voice urgent but cautious. "There's something you need to see. It's about your daughter-in-law." I remember sitting at the kitchen table, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on me, as she sent over the documents. What I found there was like a key unlocking a hidden door. It revealed a secret from my daughter-in-law's past, one she had desperately tried to bury. She wasn't just motivated by jealousy or greed. There was something darker, something that explained why she had gone to such lengths to destroy me. Years ago, before she met my son, she had been involved in a scandal, one that could ruin her reputation and her future if it ever came to light. And the gift, the perfect wedding present, was actually a carefully disguised trap designed to frame me and keep her secret safe. She had used my trust, my hope for family harmony, as a weapon against me. I felt a mix of emotions: shock, anger, betrayal, but also a strange sense of clarity. Finally, I understood the full scope of what I was up against. This wasn't just a personal attack. It was a calculated move to protect herself at any cost. Armed with this new evidence, my lawyer and I prepared to confront the truth head on. We gathered everything: the forged documents, the hidden emails, the proof of her past misdeeds, and laid it all out before the authorities. The moment of reckoning was intense. When the police returned, it was no longer me under suspicion, but her. The daughter-in-law's carefully constructed facade began to crumble, revealing the real villain behind the chaos. I watched as the weight of her actions finally caught up with her, and a sense of justice washed over me. It wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity and restoring the truth. But the emotional payoff went deeper than that. It was about healing the wounds her betrayal had inflicted on my family and finding a way to move forward despite everything. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Trust once broken takes time to rebuild. But with the truth finally out in the open, there was hope that my son would see the real story and that our family could begin to heal. The storm had passed, but the lessons it left behind would stay with me forever. Sometimes the people closest to us hide the darkest secrets. And sometimes the truth is more shocking than we ever imagined. But no matter how deep the betrayal, there is always a way to rise again. When the truth finally came to light, it felt like a heavy weight was lifted from my shoulders. My name was cleared, and the daughter-in-law, the woman who had betrayed me so deeply, faced the consequences she deserved. Watching justice unfold wasn't just about vindication. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my peace. The legal battles ended, but the real work was just beginning. Our family, fractured and bruised, slowly started to heal. My son, once torn between us, began to see the truth with his own eyes. It wasn't easy. There were tears, difficult conversations, and moments of doubt, but the love that had always been there beneath the surface started to shine through again. I found strength in forgiveness, not to excuse what had happened, but to free myself from the bitterness that threatened to consume me. I learned that healing isn't about forgetting the pain, but about choosing to move forward despite it. With every step, I felt more empowered. I realized that betrayal, no matter how deep, doesn't have to define us. We have the power to rise above, to stand tall even when the world tries to knock us down. To anyone watching who has ever felt betrayed, hurt, or abandoned, know this: you are not alone. Your pain is real, but so is your strength. You have the power to fight back, to reclaim your story, and to find peace on the other side of the storm. If you've ever felt betrayed, remember you have the power to rise above. I invite you to share your story in the comments below. Let's build a community where we support each other, where our voices are heard, and where healing begins together. Because no matter what life throws at us, we are stronger than we think, and together we can overcome anything.